It's the final day of the 2016 21st International AIDS Conference in Durban. South African Health Minister Dr. Motsoaledi will meanwhile close the 5-day day-Indaba today. The conference has attracted attention from the media all over the world. Our SABC reporter Blain Herman is standing by with some of the members of the media who have been covering the conference. Blain, a very good morning to you. And can you tell us what is happening there right now before you speak to your guest?
Yeah, thank you very much indeed, Elvis. Indeed, it's the final day, day 5, and basically we're going to get the roadmap forward. You know, we spoke about the barriers, what has hindered progress right here at the 2016 AIDS conference, and we're looking forward now to the future. And I guess, you know, breaking down the science around HIV and AIDS is sometimes a real challenge, as you would imagine, Elvis. We're dealing with some complex issues here at the 21st International AIDS Conference, and I guess it's up to journalists and health commentators to really simplify what we're getting from the plenaries in order for our audience, I guess, to better understand what the real issues are here. Let's explore this further now and speak to a few journalists. We're joined by Ida Euster, who is the Senior Health Advisor at Internews. We've got Anna Mitti, who's a Zimbabwean journalist, and Zandile Mnyeza, who is the Senior Health Researcher here at the SABC. Ladies, thank you very much indeed for your time. Ida, let me just start off with you. I mean, we're talking some challenging issues in terms of reporting on health issues. We're talking science, heavy issues that we need to unpack as journalists. What are some of the challenges?
Yeah, you know, often journalists who report on HIV and on science get really into it, and they actually get to understand it really well, but that honestly isn't enough. In fact, it would be really terrible if journalists reported on science in order to show off their knowledge of the science, because then it's all meaningless. It's all for an audience who needs to understand the science and understand why it's relevant for them. So there are lots of tips and tricks on how to do that. For instance, cure science or cure research science, discussed a lot here at the conference, is incredibly complex. There's very exciting new science that has to do with gene therapy, but we need to find metaphors to tell that story. We should not dumb it down. We should translate it. We should just tell it differently and tell it again if we have any sense that our audiences don't get it.
Yeah, and that's key, isn't it? In order not to dumb it down, but to give the real facts, and responsible journalism, I guess, is important here. What's it like reporting in Zimbabwe?
So the problem we've been facing, and which is a really huge challenge, is that the researchers themselves don't actually trust the journalists. And the journalists themselves always have this thing that what is going on? Is there something that you're hiding because the researchers are not open? So we have this misinformation, and sometimes that it's lost in translation, as it were, even if they come to a point where they are talking to each other. So that has always been a big challenge. But yeah, we've been trying to find ways to go around it.
Zandi, how has the narrative changed over the years in telling the HIV story?
I think it's been an encouraging narrative that we're seeing now compared to where the country was 16 years ago when we first hosted this conference. I mean, South Africa has the largest number of people living with HIV, but now, 16 years later, since we had the conference, we have over 3 million people on treatment. So it's essentially storytelling that is centered around the country's response to HIV. And those are the kind of stories we're talking about now. The HIV response, what's working about the response, what isn't.
And give us the sense of the importance of research, really researching your story in order not to sensationalize the story, but get the facts right.
You know, it's been really exciting to see how health reporting, not just on HIV, but on health stories, has evolved and transitioned, because now we're centering our stories on evidence-based research. And I think research is important because it dispels myths. You know, we come from a country that has been struggling with stigma and discrimination in a lot of health issues, including HIV. So I think research is an integral part, and it's exciting to see how journalists are actually using research and the information is now accessible.
And I'm sure you'll agree in terms of weeding out the myths from the facts, isn't it? That's important.
Very much so. So what we have done is that we've come up with an association of health journalists. It's called the Health Journalists Association of Zimbabwe. So where we get even the younger journalists who are being groomed and mentored by older journalists, and we have that issue of mistrust that I was talking about. So we have these researchers who come to us or who we work with and who know that, we can talk to so and so and then get the story right, because the myth's very much part of a lot of narratives, and that's what we've been trying to do.
The conference wraps up today, but how do we as journalists and as media practitioners take the story forward?
Yeah, it shouldn't be a story about the event. It is an important event for activism, for political engagement, for the science, for networking and so on, but it would be events journalism if we simply just told the story about this event. It's now about the truth-telling going forward. We know these very airwaves are being contested. The HIV story was a very contested story at one stage, but I want to commend the SABC for fantastic health and HIV coverage, and encourage everybody in the audience and everybody who's a journalist to continue to tell that story. It's become, like Zandi has said, the largest HIV program or ARV program in the world, but it's become such a complex, it's become a very hopeful story, but in many ways a more difficult story to tell. Not because of the hope, but because the science is so nuanced and is developing at a very fast pace. The political will isn't developing at the same pace. So at the conference here we've heard the term hurry up. We need to hurry up to have PrEP as in our programs. Journalists need to continue to tell that story, because HIV lives in the bodies of real people, and it's scientists, activism, journalists, and all of us together who can help perhaps contain the epidemic for now. Peter Piot said yesterday, we have the tools to contain the epidemic. We do not yet have the tools to end it. We need a vaccine and we need a cure.
And I'm talking about media tools now. I mean, Zandi, we need to use everything in our power in terms of resources to tell the story. What about social media? What part does it play in terms of telling the story?
I love the way social media has dominated this conference in comparison to when we hosted the conference in the year 2000. It has essentially been a by-the-minute reflection of people's thoughts and experiences of the conference. People living with HIV, people affected by it, and of course TB was also central. It also trended at some stage. It set the tone for the conference before it kicked off on Monday. Talks on HIV were trending on social media. Even people who couldn't make it to Durban ICC, they were able to catch it and on live streams. They were able to retweet things that they felt were really touching and compelling. So social media has really dominated the conference, particularly because that's not what the case was when we first hosted the conference. It's been lovely.
Anna, what stood out for you?
So the science was very big. It was a very, very big part of it, because that's the next step, right, towards ending AIDS. But for me, the protests as well, it's like the voice of people living with HIV, the voice of the young women, ending HIV for women, and especially young women. For me, was a very big part of the conference as well. And moving forward, I think this is the conversation that we really need to have. Like Ida was saying, that HIV lives in real people, and young women face real challenges and issues in HIV prevention. So moving forward, that conversation really must continue.
Ida, for you?
Yeah, people first knew about HIV because of the media. Most people first knew about HIV because of the media. We need to continue to ensure that people know all the aspects of HIV. This was important stock taking about the entire field of science, stock taking for networkers, stock taking for activists in terms of what to do going forward. Because it really is an important message that there are very many important tools out there which aren't being rolled out in all countries. And of course, scientists need the support and the funding to continue to find the tools that will actually end the epidemic. And I think as journalists we need to tell that story because of how it impacts, again, on real people.
Ida, Anna and Zandi, who is one of our hardest working researchers here at the SABC, I can attest to that. Thank you very much indeed, ladies, for your time. That's how we'll wrap things up for now. It's back to studio.